Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, grasshoppers. The game that we're about to see is the best game voted on by the annotators of the Chess Informant. Now, this is from the book 1000 Best of the Best. Whoops, and I realize that we are missing our image, our player image of Portisch. And we do need an image of Portisch really quickly. To replace the image of Petrosian. I just realized, obviously. Let's put him up. Pardon our temporary delay as we post in a quick image. A new source. What? That's so funny. Image, add source, add a new source. Not realize that I could do that, interestingly enough. There's our image of Portisch for the most part. Let's trim him up for the occasion. Bring him down just a little bit. Yes, yes, Petrosian is hiding in the background. Whoa! Player images. What happened there? One moment. We accidentally took out our 1000. The book covers. Where did the book cover go? Portisch, of course, not exactly. There they are. Now, the book we are using, as mentioned, is the Chess Informant 1000 Best of the Best games. And it is important that we recognize that each Chess Informant for the first 1,010 or so included had 10 best games noted from the previous issues, and they voted by a panel of judges. Virgirov joins the panel, Mislov joins the panel, along with Ullman and Korchnoi for this particular panel's judges. Now, interestingly enough, from 10 for the best possible game to the lowest possible ranking of 1, only one particular person voted on this as the best possible game, Wolfgang Ullman. Others put this as second, Pano and Lothar Schmidt. Vishwikov also had it as his second best game, the third best game for Korchnoi, and the fourth best game for Philippe. Virgirov had this game way down on his list for the most part, almost non-existently. Now, this is a Meran variation. This is a queen pawn variation that is very quiet and very slow. We have to move d4 d5, c4. Now, Svein Johanessen, who's played black, was the best player of his day from Norway. And I have a book of his best games not far away. Now, Svein Johanessen is actually doing very, very well in this game. This is a picture of Svein Johanessen from the book Stockmeister and Svein Johanessen, and there are many of his games, including biography. I played in the Svein Johanessen Memorial Tournament. It was an invitational tournament for, I played for roughly 8 years. I didn't play in the second one, and I did not attend the very first one. We found out about the very first one when we used it. So this book has tremendous amounts of notation, all in Norwegian. It was a gift somewhere around 2011 or 2010 at my very first one. And Svein Johanessen was a very solid player. In fact, he preferred the move c6. And Portisch begins with a very daring move, knight c3. Now, this very daring move, knight c3, encourages black to capture on c4, which did not happen in the game. And because it didn't happen in the game, we might not give it that much consideration. But obviously, there are opportunities for black to attempt to hang on to the pawn. We might feel the need to break down this pawn structure, and now that black's pawns have been loosened, we'll be able to attempt to create certain amounts of counterplay against them. Now, this is still slightly better for white. I agree that white is down a pawn, but the pawn on c4 cannot be held. Often, in fact, it's jettisoned back with the move c3, d takes c3, d takes c3, and with the knight returning to its original square, this is a rather amusing position. You can't allow the pawn to move forward with check. Interestingly enough, going to our initial position, the moves d4, d5 constitute the closed games. In the closed games, white's king does not necessarily need to castle, neither does black's. It is important, though, that we control the center. We make pawn breaks for the center, but we develop our pieces very actively. And in this particular case, Svein Johanessen just chooses a very solid path. Maybe Portisch read him correctly. And in this manner, without the move knight f3 being on the board, Portisch plays the move e3, entering the Meran Variation. In the Meran Variations, yes, that did take place. They are named after a tournament that was held in Merano, Italy. The anti-Meran Variations, of course, would come from positions such as knight f3, e6, bishop to g5, and we reach the Botvinnik Variation. Now, of course, in the Botvinnik Variation, probably the most well-known anti-Meran, black entices white into sacrificing a piece for 2 pawns to sham sacrifice, as the knight on f6 is certainly going to be lost and taken back. White might put a bishop on the long diagonal. And in this particular position, however black goes about it, both sides will develop their pieces accordingly. And you'll notice that once the knight is no longer pinned, white's capturing on f6. Black will be castling, white might be castling, and when black plays the move c5, white will attempt to keep certain amounts of the lines closed with the move d5, and the most topical position is reached after b4. There's Kravnik's passive knight sacrifice, and there's a game that we already looked at in a previous YouTube video, knight a4, which is played by Ivanchuk against Shirov a couple of times. And that led to even a very famous queen sacrifice, queen to g4, queen to g7. So Ivanchuk Shirov is the game you're looking for if you want to see a very incredible queen sacrifice, allowing the pawn to reach g7, and white achieves quite a number of minor pieces in return for that. Returning to our game, one more time again with the opening, d4, d5, c4, c6, constituting the Slav variation, S-L-A-V. The Slav variation and the Queen's Gambit declined. Knight c3, not the normal continuation. Usually I I like to say if black plays e6, then knight c3, knight f6, and then bishop g5, and we reach a standard orthodox variation of the Queen's Gambit in no time at all. There are some variants here, of course. Today, many players favor the Rogozin, but the Rogozin isn't necessarily the Rogozin without the move knight f3 on board. In fact, it's the variation played against people who avoid the Nimzo Indian. So with the move c6, knight c3, knight f6, e3, e6, knight f3, knight on b to d7, we're entering the really calm waters of the Meran. Bishop to d3, bishop to e2, and queen to c2 are all very popular moves in this position. Queen to c2 being the most popular, hoping not to lose a tempo if black takes on c4. Karpov and many others often prefer queen to c2, but bishop d3 is met, of course, by the immediate time gaining and pawn break preparing. D takes c4, bishop takes c4, b5, bishop to d3. And while honestly I think a6 is more solid, bishop to b7 is more solid. In this particular game, Johanessen goes for it with the move b4. Now there's no reason to sound any general alarms here, as we can still centralize our knight, and black can still complete his development with bishop to b7. It's at this moment that Portisch embarks on a little bit of an unusual path. He exchanges his knight on e4 for the knight on d7. These two are and should be considered redundant knights. Being on f6 and d7, they're both doing the same job. So personally, I would probably consider a move like b3 or castles just yet. However, Portisch goes for the move knight takes f6, knight takes f6, and then immediately begins embarking on a plan to both restrict black's queenside pawns with queen to a4 and to prepare the central pawn break with e4. So Portisch plans to get his king out of the center. White puts pressure on the d2 pawn with bishop d2, puts pressure on the b4 pawn. Black finds the best move to guard it. This position is completely and totally level. And while I might consider castling, perhaps even knight to e5 to put further pressure on the white squares, Portisch embarks on a plan for central expansion with e4. Black gets his king out of danger by castling. After all, there are some threats along these short diagonals and everything. And now white continues the central expansion with e5, and I would more than likely play the knight to d5, but he chose knight to d7. So how do we continue here? Well, it's possible that I might put the bishop on e4 and continue putting pressure on the c6 pawn. Rook to c1 also enters my mind. However, the move queen to c2 is Portisch's brute force attempt at creating threats toward the black king, and he is literally, by sheer force of will, going to blow Svein Johanessen off the board here in the Olympiad of 1966. This is Hungary versus Norway. h6 is played to prevent the loss of the pawn, and Portisch starts to throw the kitchen sink at him with h4. Of course, the best answer to an attack on the flank is a counterattack in the center, so c5 is fairly obvious. And white immediately brings another attacker into the game. Now, it's hard to believe that this game is going to end in a dozen short moves or less, but it is. And for the most part,
123.
After rook h3,
hello there.
Bishop h3, white plays a relatively unusual move. Good morning, no words. How are you? We are looking for candidate moves for white in this position. Candidate moves for white, and we're going to give ourselves roughly a minute. If you're watching this on demand, you may pause the video, of course, to try to consider what it would be that white would try to do in this position. Now, there might not be any rush to recapture on f3, or he may choose an unorthodox manner of recapturing on f3, a standard capture on f3, but certainly anyone who writes down castle and queenside
said
will run into some
morning
problems.
It's PM at night for me. I am going to sleep soon. I am fine. Just did an arbiter's chorus.
An arbiter's chorus. Very nice. Well, our stream is only going to be about 25 minutes long, so that gives us about 7 or 8 minutes left, because I am keeping the streams to the length of the game, move by minute. And in this particular case,
said
G takes f3 is a perfectly normal and logical move. However, the best move in this position, and we should give it the exclam that it deserves, Portisch continues throwing the kitchen sink at his opponent with bishop h6. Now, I'm not going to say what the computer assessment is here, but I will tell you that black should be better throughout this game. The heat, the fire with which Portisch approaches this game is what carries it through. Black decides to prevent it, and he does play the best move. Black, well, actually the best move is probably bishop to g4, but he attempts to stop a rook from coming to g3 while everything is hanging. And you are correct. After g takes f3, the G file is open, and we already discussed this in a previous video just before Iran. We actually covered Bansky versus Petrosian less than an hour ago. Now we're doing Informant Golden Game number 2 from the second volume of the Informant. We're doing Portisch versus Johanessen from the Havana Olympiad of 1966, and we will be done with 1966 shortly as we move on to 1967 for game number 3. The Informant came out every 6 months in those days, and the panel of judges that voted on these was held in very high regard. Now, black does capture on h6, and white does prepare the attack further. So candidate moves for white.
It was over my head. I know nothing at all.
Once again, we're pulling from the book 1000, Best of the Best, provided by Chess Informant. So these games can be obtained on CD in PGN format, as well as in hardcover or print format, which is the book that I'm using now. These are a part of the Golden Games daily training assignments that are available on our Discord channel, where I provide these games without any annotations. I provide these games without any annotations with the assignment that you will study them before this stream, before watching the stream. However, it's not that important that you watch them before the stream. Our time is up. And of course, the move that white plays in this particular position is nailed on its third attempt, on the third stroke, if this were a miniature golf game, with King E2. Of course, we might run into some technical difficulties if we castle, because there will be counterplay on the open C file, and we might need to worry about that. We also have to worry about Queen to G5 check, that rook moving across, and the king escaping. All in all, a very possible outcome. So the move King E2 was played. And now black decides to immediately strike away at the center for immediate counterplay. Now white is better in this position. And black was better in the moments before this. But black in desperation strikes out with knight takes e5 and queen to d4. in order to create counterplay on the f2 square. And the only way to alleviate that pressure and obtaining an equal game is to play rook takes h4, queen takes h4, and continue our attack with rook to g1 check. And the king is perfectly safe on h8. There's absolutely nothing going on here. We're going to go with some candidate moves for white again. I do like to get several in per stream. And of course, if you're watching on demand, you may pause the video, of course, for a little bit longer time to think. Again, Chess Informant has been used by nearly every world champion to date as study material by the groupings of games, the development of the pieces, the coordination of the pieces, the flux of opening theory. Please check out Chess Informant. And for more streams like this, you'll get notifications on Twitter
Now Urds
and in
123
our Discord channel by
Said
following our socials.
B.
And all of these will be in a playlist for golden games. Bishop e4, not energetic enough.
Pegasus Sway.
Said QC.
Indeed, we need an idea to get the rook to h1 and the ability to target the pawn on h6 with queen to c1. Now, of course, the target is h6, and black answers rather hastily with f6 in order to give his king an out. Candidate moves for white.
He's in the best-selling show. Is there life?
Thank you, Ron, for being here, man. Cheers.
It's on America's tortured brow that Mickey Mouse has grown up a.
Now, so far, of all the games I've done in the first 16, this has been the least impressive game as far as Stockfish or Chessbase approval. Now, this should not have taken
Pegasus Sway.
Said RG.
rook g6. I noticed that he's only throwing one dart. Of course, rook to h1 and rook to g6 and bishop to e4 as suggested before. By no words. No, bishop e4 is still a candidate move, by the way. I didn't mean to downplay your candidate move. However, far more energetic is rook to g6, which forced black's resignation. Fascinatingly enough. That was the end of the game. And I hope everyone enjoyed this game, as it was game number 2 of Portisch versus Johanessen. There were many, many twists and turns along the way, and if you analyze this game on your own or using Stockfish, you will find that your annotations are at least as good as those that were given in the Informant. The assessments given at the Informant are relatively off, considering the optimistic approach from the winning side of the game. Thank you for being here. Cheers and ciao, everyone. Thank you, Ron.
Now Urds 123
Said thanks for the stream, loved it.
Cheers and ciao.